Welcome to the Evening News for today, Wednesday, July 30, 2014. I'm Avinash Ramzan. Thanks for joining us. In the headlines, Congress Place shooter arrested at CJIA. PNCR claims its elections were flawless. Justice Claudette Singh appointed legal advisor for the police. National Action Plan to Combat Sexual Offences launched. $1 million budget commissioned at Supernam, and government did not approve funds for a Zebok Secondary School. Now for the news in detail. The man who allegedly discharged a loaded firearm in Congress Place on Sunday was arrested as he attempted to leave the country after a few days on the run. Bashar Mohammed reports.
Moments before boarding a Caribbean Airlines flight destined for the John F. Kennedy International Airport on Tuesday evening, the perpetrator, who discharged a round during the last day of the People's National Congress Reform Congress, was nabbed at the Cheddi Jagan International Airport. Ever since the shooting incident, the police have been hunting for Lyndon Primo, but he disappeared until his arrest on Tuesday evening. Members of the Criminal Investigation Department have launched an investigation into the shooting incident and have since confirmed that no firearm license was issued to the said individual. One source confirmed that the man is being grilled by CID ranks at police headquarters and is expected to be slapped with 2 charges: discharging a loaded firearm in a public place and possession of an unlicensed firearm. Hours after the shooting incident at Congress Place, party leader David Granger told media operatives that the internal security of the PNCR had launched an investigation surrounding the incident. Party chairman Basil Williams came to Primo's rescue after the incident as the media mounted pressure on David Granger-led party. Williams is on record saying that the shot was fired in the air after there was a situation at one of the polling stations. He said someone was in danger of being trampled, hence the unknown individual fired a shot in the air to disperse the crowd. Bashar Mohammed, Evening News.
Meanwhile, People's National Congress Reform has rubbished arguments that its electoral process was overwhelmed with flaws. In an attempt to pour cold water on the allegations, the main opposition party said Sharma Solomon and his supporters from the initial stage had intentions of causing maximum disruption at the 18th Biennial Delegates Conference. The details from Svetlana Marshall.
People's National Congress Reform PNCR Vice Chairperson Waldo Lawrence today said the elections which resulted in David Granger returning as party leader was free, fair and transparent, as she condemned reports that dozens of members from Linden Region 10 were disenfranchised. Backed by the party's General Secretary Oscar Clark, Lawrence told reporters at Congress Place that 794 persons were accredited delegates to the 18th Biannual Congress from all 10 administrative regions, in addition to those from the North American and UK region. Alluding to Region 10, Lawrence said despite moves by the Central Executive Committee to resolve the concerns of Region 10, the regional chairman Sharma Solomon and his few supporters were bent on creating confusion.
During the opening ceremony on Friday, the 25th July 2014, day 1 of the Congress, it was evident that a handful of party members had convinced a segment of the Region 10 community, including non-members, to travel to Georgetown to disrupt what was an otherwise orderly and successful opening ceremony. This was followed by several calculated and well-planned acts of disorder. This group was well-organized, well-financed, and dressed in a uniform manner, and abused the spirit of our party and the sanctity of our Congress.
According to the PNCR Vice Chairperson, a large number of persons who were transported from Linden during the Congress were not delegates or observers. In a quest to build the party's argument, Lawrence said the executives made every effort to resolve the issues put by Solomon and former General Secretary Aubrey Norton, pointing out that the elections were delayed to facilitate this process.
It was becoming increasingly clear that Comrade Norton and Comrade Solomon had no interest in seeking a resolution to the issues they had raised. Instead, they were obviously intent on embarrassing the People's National Congress Reform. The objective appeared to be to cause maximum disruption of the elections process. Persons who were needed delegates nor observers were encouraged to crash the barriers to gain entry into the auditorium.
PNCR reportedly has a membership of 837 persons, of which 794 were accredited delegates for the just concluded biannual Congress. Region 10, however, was entitled to 119 delegates, but some 55 persons did not uplift their delegate cards. From the remainder, 22 voted, while approximately 30 stormed out of the Congress with their regional chairman on Sunday. Svetlana Marshall reporting for the Evening News.
And the People's National Congress Reform General Secretary Oscar Clarke said Aubrey Norton should have known better than to create havoc during the 18th Biannual Congress. According to Clarke, Norton should apologize to the Region 10 Chairman Sharma Solomon for misleading him. Here again is Svetlana Marshall.
A few long-standing members of the People's National Congress Reform PNCR, including the former General Secretary Aubrey Norton, have openly criticized the party over its apparent failure to hold the Constitution during the just concluded 18th Biannual Congress. In response, the General Secretary Oscar Clarke said members are free to vent their concerns, but made it clear that the party's Constitution was upheld during the process.
Mr. Norton is a former General Secretary of the People's National Congress Reform. He's a former member of Parliament of this party. He's a former member of the Central Executive of this party. And I think that Mr. Norton, in all of those capacities, should know better than to make some of the comments he has made about our party. He should know the Constitution, and he should know that we have followed the Constitution slavishly in the promotion of this Congress, everything that we've done.
According to him, if Norton wants to remain a useful member of the PNCR, he should desist from creating strife. Clarke further opined that Norton should offer an apology to Region 10 Chairman Sharma Solomon.
I think that Mr. Aubrey Norton should apologize to Mr. Sharma Solomon for what he did to him. He misled him, and Mr. Sharma Solomon, I think, at this point, a young leader in our party must be at this point beginning to feel that he has been badly done in by Mr. Norton. Because I think Mr. Norton, who has been long established and experienced party leader, should not mislead a young leader, a young, fresh leader, like Mr. Sharma Solomon. And that is what has happened in this case.
A Partnership for National Unity, APNU Shadow Finance Minister Carl Greenwich had called for Clarke's resignation, claiming that he failed to address the issues facing Linden Region 10. In response, Clarke had this to say.
This is my party, and I decide one way or the other how I will behave, but you can call, anybody can call if Mr. Greenwich wants to call for my resignation. He cannot make it happen. He can say publicly that General Secretary should resign. But those who know the work of the General Secretary know better.
Svetlana Marshall reporting for the Evening News.
But even the suspension imposed on Vanessa Kissoon by the David Granger-led leadership of the People's National Congress Reform could not stop her from taking Basil Williams, Valda Lawrence and Ronald Bulkan to task for disrespecting Lindeners and calling them names.
Suspended PNCR Region 10 representative and Member of Parliament Vanessa Kissoon says that Lindeners have taken note of the utterances of the party's executive Basil Williams, Valda Lawrence and Ronald Bulkan. She said that Lindeners will not stand idly by and allow those executives to disrespect them or call them names because of the views and positions they hold. Kissoon strongly condemned the attacks by the party's head of its public relations unit, Mark Archer, describing them as irresponsible and distasteful. Nonetheless, Kissoon said it is time for the leadership of the People's National Congress to rethink its modus operandi and bring an end to its silly season as there is a general elections to be won. She said that the party, considered a civilian organization, is guided by its own rules. According to her, those rules must be used to unite and position the party as the country's best political alternative. Every man, woman and child, she said, must feel that they will be treated equally and protected by the party. And while Kissoon's statement is geared at reinforcing a message of peace for the political party she embraces, she also expressed disappointment over the way in which its leadership has been dealing with her recent suspension. The disciplinary committee investigating the Vanessa Kissoon-Oscar Clark debacle had imposed a 3-month ban on the party member. However, minutes after the end of the party's 18th biennial Congress on Sunday, party leader David Granger told reporters that a ban had been lifted for 12 hours, allowing Kissoon to participate. Kissoon, however, stated that she takes personal offense of the new development, which according to her is more of a detention rather than a suspension. Kissoon said, not being told of that decision by the party, she is left with one assumption, that the party is operating in the 18th century, when women had to know their place and decisions were made for them without their involvement or knowledge. She said her attendance at Congress was consistent with Rule 15 of the party's constitution, under which she was accordingly accredited. It was not a concession granted. Kissoon says that while she needs no concession, she is asking that her rights be respected, consistent with the party rules. Reporting for the Evening News, I'm Alexis Rodney.
Former Justice of the Appeal Claudette Singh has been appointed by the President Donald Ramotar as a legal advisor for the Guyana Police Force. The details in this report.
Cabinet Secretary Dr. Roger Lenchen on Wednesday announced that Justice Claudette Singh has been appointed as a legal advisor to the Guyana Police Force. According to Dr. Lenchen, while the Director of Public Prosecutions is currently responsible for legally advising the police, there are some daily issues that would need the attention of a legal advisor. He explained that Justice Singh will be able to efficiently offer her legal advice on these issues.
Indeed, advises the police, is responsible for advising the police, but there continues to be a significant element of police work, police investigations, police prosecution that warrants almost the day-to-day, the physical access, day-to-day of their own legal advisor.
Dr. Lenchen noted that Justice Singh will be offering the police force quality legal advice at their disposal at all time. Meanwhile, he was asked whether the appointment of a legal advisor for police force is linked with the fact that the Alliance for Change has filed a case against Finance Minister Dr. Ashni Singh for unlawfully spending $4.5 billion. Dr. Lenchen dismissed the notion, stating that the process to appoint a legal advisor began long before the AFC had raised the issue regarding Dr. Singh's spending.
So I don't see a link between the power and the charge against Mr. Singh.
Justice Claudette Singh is a former judge at the appeal court and has practiced extensively. She had also had several initiatives within the security and legal sectors and sat on the Linden Commission of Inquiry, which ran from September 2012 to February 2013. Shani Singh for the Evening News.
More news still ahead. Stay tuned. This is the Evening News. This is the Evening News. Welcome back. Region 10 Health Committee Chairman Maurice Bottas has claimed that a Linden Hospital complex, that's the LHC board, is illegitimate, saying it was never legally established. He said the 13-member board, which was derived from an interim management committee in IMC, is currently finding it difficult to manage the affairs of the institution owing to its illegality. According to the concerned Region 10 Health Committee Chairman, an act or motion of Parliament is necessary to legitimize the board, and such must have a legal framework to attach to it. In light of this, he said it was disturbing that the IMC has now taken on the outlook of a board and is viewed as such, with instances of letters being addressed to persons in their capacity of member of the LHC board. He stressed that while the IMC is adopting the mantle of the board, it is not legal. The Ministry of Human Service and Social Security has launched the National Action Plan to combat sexual offences, which will work in tandem with the Sexual Offences Act. Details in this report.
The National Action Plan, which was launched earlier today, was compiled by a consultant attached to the Ministry of Human Services and Social Security. The consultant worked with several entities in preparation of the document, which is aimed at combating sexual offences. The plan also urges a multi-agency approach towards tackling the scourge. According to Human Services Minister Jennifer Webster, the plan will boost the capacity of sleuths and other professionals that are in direct contact with victims of sexual violence.
It is therefore imperative that as we go forward, to recognize that our responses must be to better protect our people and provide efficient and effective services. As Minister of Human Services, I wish to take this opportunity and to use this forum as a platform to reiterate the call for more professional and efficient services for our people by professionals entrusted with the responsibility of addressing and pursuing cases of sexual violence within our society.
Meanwhile, United Nations Populations Fund representative Patrice Lafleur lauded the government for progress in fighting sexual offences. Lafleur underscored the need for the multi-sectoral approach, as she said that each agency has an important role to play.
I think it is critical as we meet here today to discuss and probably to agree on what are the next steps that we address sexual violence and gender-based violence from a multi-sectoral approach. I think this is what is lacking, because every sector has to be involved. I think even our families and our communities, because violence is a violation of our human rights, but it is also a cultural issue, an issue which has to be addressed from the standpoint of how we socialize not only our girls, but also how we socialize our boys, and how we can ensure that we have a different perspective, a different orientation to discipline.
Further, UNICEF representative plugged the need for each child to be protected. She noted that as a result of attached taboo and stigmatization, many sexual offences go unreported. She said this trend should stop, as she hopes that an action plan will aid in this regard.
Protocols have been developed for medical officers, police, prosecutors and social workers. The overall goal is to provide support, introduce best practices and set minimum standards for the treatment of survivors and investigation of reported cases. A lot of good work is being done, but there is still scope for improvement. As UNICEF, we would like to recommend the following. To the police, to remember that you are often the first point of contact for a victim of sexual offences. While your role is to collect information and evidence for prosecution, the victim has also other immediate needs, such as medical attention and counselling or psychological treatment.
For the Evening News, Alexis Rodney.
Head of the Presidential Secretariat, Dr. Roger Luncheon, today corrected reports made last week that government had approved funds for the construction of Zeeburg Secondary School in Region 3. Last week, Dr. Luncheon disclosed that Cabinet had approved some $204.5 million for the project. However, at the post-Cabinet briefing today, Dr. Luncheon explained that there was a mistake and the award of the contract was not granted. According to Dr. Lunchin, it was brought to Cabinet's attention that the evaluation committee was not properly constituted according to the laws. In this year's budget, some $32.3 billion was allocated to the infrastructural and other improvements of the education sector. Funds were also budgeted for the implementation of the new education strategic plan. As part of the plan, $2.9 billion is expected to be used for the construction, rehabilitation, extension, and maintenance of education facilities, including a new and expanded Seabrook Secondary School and the Cato Secondary Complex. Meanwhile, Education Minister Priya Manichan today revealed that a recent incident of fraud at her ministry was uncovered, but the issue has already been resolved.
Education Minister Priya Manichan told reporters that the misappropriation of $300,000 was recently discovered at her ministry. She said that the matter has since been resolved and is attracting the attention of the Public Service Ministry.
There was a discovery of something that was fraudulent, you're right, or something that was probably illegal. The permanent secretary is the chief financial officer. She's the accounting officer of the ministry, and dealt with it in collaboration with the Ministry of Finance as well as the Ministry of Public Service, because as you know, we don't hire. It's the Public Service Ministry that hires and so on. I think, as far as I know, the person is no longer working with us. The fraud had amounted to $300 and something thousand that was misappropriated.
She said that while she is not aware whether the person has been dismissed, her immediate concern is his removal from the Education Ministry. Manichan explained that this was done and it is now up to the Public Service Ministry to pursue disciplinary action.
The Ministry of Public Service was dealing with the discipline of the person, and discipline usually has a process. You have to give people a fair hearing and so on. My immediate concern was that that person was no longer in the Ministry of Education. And as far as I have been told, and I have no reason to dispute that information, the person is no longer in the Ministry of Education.
Has this impacted payment of,
It did impact payment for 1 month because we had to... I think everybody who's paid by the Georgetown office, I think there was a stall up for a week or 2 weeks or something because we had to pause just to make sure that we knew what was going on.
For the Evening News, Alexis Rodney.
Commuters traversing from Supernam and Perica will now be accommodated under a comfortable waiting area at Supernam rather than standing in the sun for hours until a boat is loaded. This was made possible through the commissioning of a $1 million spanking new bus shed, compliments of the United Nations Development Programme, the UNDP. The structure was funded by the UNDP in collaboration with the local government ministry Youth Empowerment Programme. The structure was constructed by Mohammed Ramjan Constructing Service. Speaking to charity residents, members of the Speedboat Association and other government officials, local government minister Norman Whitaker said the building is the product of a partnership agreement. More news still ahead. Stay tuned. This is Evening News. Welcome back. In the courts, a 35-year-old joiner who resides at Lot 134 Monreport today appeared before Chief Magistrate Priya Sinarayan Bihari at the Georgetown Magistrates Court after he was charged for fraud. The charge, which was read by the Chief Magistrate, stated that on August 7, 1998, at Georgetown, the defendant Michael Mendonza signed a written declaration for the purpose of securing a new Guyana passport in the name of Robert Mendonza. The name that the defendant had used happened to be his brother's name. He pleaded guilty to the charge and told the court that it was a mistake and that he is sorry. He was represented by attorney Paul Fongafat, who requested leniency from the court. He was fined $39,000 or an alternative of 3 months in jail. Government today made donations to several African groups who will host various activities over the weekend to mark this year's emancipation period.
Minister of Culture, Youth and Sport Dr. Frank Anthony today handed over some $8,125,000 in checks to 88 different African groups to fund their emancipation activities. The ceremony, which was held at the Ministry of Culture, Youth and Sport, consisted of exuberant African songs and a dance by the National School. Speaking at the ceremony, Dr. Frank Anthony said that we must not forget the struggles and sacrifices our ancestors had faced.
We must make sure that the children that are coming up understands that history, because that is so important. We have been very pleased to be working with you on these Emancipation Days, and I was just asking the PS, and he said the first time when we engage in such an activity with cultural groups goes back to 2005, and at that time we had two groups that we were working with. I'm very pleased today, in 2014, we're working with close to 88 groups. And that's really something.
Shania Singh for the Evening News.
Meanwhile, the Essequibo African Association will be hosting a candlelight parade proceeding from Damon's Cross, LaBelle Alliance Square to Anna Regina Car Park, that's Damon Monument, on Thursday night. This will be followed by a cultural show. According to a release from the association, the candlelight parade is expected to attract a large crowd, and persons are expected to walk along the public road with lighted candles and bottle lamps to the car park. The parade will begin at 20:30 and will be accompanied by drumming. Back in the courts, the two teenagers who appeared in court on January 22, 2014 before Chief Magistrate Priya Sinarayan Bihari were today fined $100,000 per charge and 3 years imprisonment. 18-year-old Kevin George of Lot 99 Haley Street and 17-year-old Samuel Johnson of Lot 158 Curtis Street, Albuystown, both pleaded not guilty to the charges of illegal firearm possession and ammunition before the Chief Magistrate. The first charge alleged that on January 21 at Aubrey Barker Road, South Ranvelt, they had in their possession one M16 rifle and 60.23 rounds of ammunition, respectively. Police prosecutor Michael Grant told the court that ranks on mobile patrol saw the lads on Aubrey Barker Road acting in a suspicious manner. The number one accused, George, was carrying a haversack on his back, and as the police approached, the haversack was passed between the two defendants until George finally discarded of it. The police subsequently carried out a search on the young men. A subsequent search on the haversack revealed the items mentioned in the charges. George was represented by attorney at law Peter Hugh, who told the court that indeed the firearm that his client possessed was a serious one. Nevertheless, he requested the Chief Magistrate to be lenient with him. Johnson was also represented in court by attorney at law Clive Ford, who also requested that his worship be lenient with his client. They were both given 3 years imprisonment and a fine of $100,000 per charge. Join us after the break for your regional, international and bridge reports. Stay tuned. This is the Evening News. In the region, the U.S. is imposing travel restrictions on a number of Venezuelan officials. Officials did not specify how many people would be affected, but said those who have been responsible for or complicit in human rights abuses would not be welcome in the U.S. The Venezuelan opposition has been lobbying for sanctions since thousands of protesters were detained during anti-government protests. Internationally, global medical charity Doctors Without Borders has given warning that the Ebola crisis in West Africa is, quote-unquote, unprecedented, absolutely out of control, as states across the world took steps to prevent its spread. Bart Johansson, the charity's director of operations, warned that there was no overarching vision of how to tackle the outbreak. More than 670 people have died of Ebola in the outbreak, the largest on record since the disease was detected. In case you've just joined us, you're watching the Evening News. We now take a look at your bridge reports. The Demerara Harbour Bridge is expected to be closed from 5 hours on Thursday, July 31, 2014 for a period of 1.5 hours, and the Berbice River Bridge is expected to be closed from 6 hours 25 on Thursday, July 21, 2014 for a period of 1.5 hours. Join us after the break for sports, sponsored by Macoop. This is the Evening News.